Hey guys, welcome to another session of RBTL. This week we have Yufine banner drop rate up, including a new artifact, brand new artifact, as well as Yufine's side story. So that's kind of exciting because I think a lot of people want to know Yufine's background, but we never really knew about it until now. So sweet nightmare. I'm going to talk about the artifact. That's it pretty much for the patch. It's just the side story with the new banner, with the new artifact. So I kind of did some brief thinking on the artifact itself. My thoughts going into it is it's not a bad one. The good thing is it's not a limited artifact. If you don't have Yufine, definitely try to pull a bit on this banner. I wouldn't say she's bait. She's definitely usable. Very good. She's actually a decent pick for RTA if you can sneak Oxlots in or some kind of CR pusher. She comes in handy for sure. We'll talk about her full kit later. I'll show my build. But in terms of Merciless Glutton, because most people, if you're a bit older player, you might have Yufine already, since we did get her banner, like a single banner. I think it was during the Korean festival, so it's not even that long ago. It's when we got the Midnight Bloom artifact. So she already came by, but then this time now they're dropping her with a new artifact, which that's a whole other subject in and of itself with how Smilegate is running these banners now. But just in case people are wondering, should I be pulling for this artifact? If you do the reading, I don't think it's that necessary. Although I think there are going to be some use cases for it. Yufine already does insane high damage herself, so being able to get a kill is pretty easy for her, especially with an attack buff. Although I do have to say that right now I think there are better artifacts in terms of damage dealers. If you're doing RTA, Tonfa is a very good one. Hellcutter is not bad on Yufine as well if you can't manage the crit rate. Draco Plate is always good on a warrior, especially if you need that extra survivability, and of course they increase the critical hit damage. Although I do think that this one does have a place, especially if you're fighting like decently fast but squishier heroes. If you do the reading, and we do need to test this because I think there's a lot of speculation with how this is worded. Increase the combat readiness by 15% when an enemy is defeated, with 100% chance, up to 100% chance to increase effectiveness for 2 turns. If you get one copy of this, at a plus 15, it's 75% chance to increase the effectiveness for 2 turns. Now what that looks like, I'm not quite sure yet, but we do have an effect resistance buff now, quite popular, especially with the Fire Akate's S3 exclusive equipment and Alina's release. We know what that looks like, and that buff is a 50% increase. So we can safely say that this reads like a buff. This reads like a buff because it says 2 turns. Increases effectiveness for 2 turns. We can safely assume that this is a 50% effectiveness increase buff, which means like it can be dispellable, but it does get a proc rate buff from the artifact itself. So up to 100%. I don't think a plus 30 is necessary, other than the flat stats you may want. The attack is not super high. The health is pretty decent in terms of the stats that come from the artifact itself. But in terms of like out of the box at a plus 15, is it usable? 100% if you're going to use it for the CR boost and roll that 75% effectiveness buff anyway. What it reads like though is that if you do use Yufine's S3, soul burn at 20 souls, you get an extra turn. It does kind of read like you would be able to get multiple CR boosts per skill. Note that little note at the bottom saying that can be only activated once per skill, and I was trying to understand what that meant. And because it's not, because there's other artifacts where it's worded and locked to the caster's turn or the hero's turn. This reads like if you proc a dual attack and she kills on a dual attack, it would actually proc the CR increase, which can make this one actually decent all around. Because if you guys actually watch some of my YouTube videos and watch one of my videos called how not to one-shot Banshee 11, you know that my Yufine like proc dual attacks like almost like 4 or 5 times, and I'm not exaggerating, in a row pretty much. So I mean, if you get that kind of luck in a PvP fight and you can kill with the S1, you get multiple CR boosts, so it's pretty cool. And again, based on that reading, it means that if you do dual turn, do a soul burn, you kill on the S3, you get a CR boost of 15%. And yes, while it is still your turn, you can actually bank up combat readiness. Now I know that it works on some skills, but I'm not sure if it works here for an artifact. But if it does, you can actually bank up CR. So even though it is your turn, you're technically still at 100% CR. It banks up to 15% for the next turn, so after your turn ends. So if you kill with the first one, let's say you kill one person on the S3 and you dual turn and you kill one person on the S2, theoretically speaking, you should actually have 30% CR boost by that turn end on the S2. So it could be good. You could be looking at a lot of CR, and I think that's why they wanted to word it that way. It can be only activated once per skill. Now, someone on stream was saying that maybe that means that if you kill multiple targets with the S2, it may only get 15% CR boost. Again, this is a bit of a speculation, so I'm not going to go down too far. Regardless, I think the wording could be a bit more clear, but we'll have to do some tests to see how this works. In my opinion, again, if you don't have Yufine, definitely pull for it. I think now is the better time, since you'll be getting an interesting artifact regardless. This could be usable on Surmia as well, since Surmia does kill quite quick. Most people, I mean, if you don't run a Surmia like on a speed set, you're looking at about a 120, 130 speed nuker build, which guarantees the one shot, and that's kind of how Surmia is built now anyway. So if you're guaranteeing the one shot and you're kind of slow anyway, that 15% combat readiness boost becomes very, very handy. But again, the problem is though, because you want to guarantee the kill on Surmia, you still default to some sort of Portrait of Savior, Tonfa, or even Draco plate, or even Border Coin. So that becomes a problem. But if your stats are high enough in terms of damage, I was actually talking to one of my friends yesterday. He was building a 6k attack Surmia with a 230 crit damage. In my opinion, that would, I mean, we looked at the damage calculation. It cuts through pretty much anything. But if you could get those kind of stats and you run this artifact on, I think it definitely helps. I mean, effectiveness on Surmia is not so good because ideally you want to cycle her S3, but otherwise, if you don't kill on the S3, you could still maybe land it unhealable on the S1. So it could be okay. Regardless, I think the artifact is not completely garbage. It's a nice to have, but probably not a chase. Like, you don't have to chase it, especially the fact that it's not a limited artifact. So even if you wanted to wait, you could wait for people to do tests, and then maybe if this comes onto the powder shop one day, you can pick that up. So regardless, let's talk about Yufine. Now I do have hold on, I'm gonna switch to my game view. I'm just gonna talk about her a bit. So I have talked about her in the past, and I have showed builds in the past. You will see my rocking the T70 helmet and armor. I show the stats here. I'm gonna kind of talk about her kit. So in case if you're a new player and you're watching and you pull Yufine, or you have Yufine, or you're going to pull for Yufine, you actually know what she does. She does have a pretty high base attack, 1228, and she actually has in her awakening. I'm gonna show here. In her awakening, she actually has the critical hit damage because she's a Taurus warrior. So she actually gets a 15% critical hit damage. I think it's about here somewhere. Yeah, there you go. So you get an additional 15% critical hit damage, and you saw there she has an additional crit rate as well. So all around, she's built for damage. Not long ago, only a couple months ago, she actually received a buff from the developers as well, so it makes her really, really strong. The buff is actually based on her skills, not tweaking the mods itself, but this S3 is now very, very, very powerful, and is one of the reasons why Yufine is highly used. It dispels all the buffs before, so you could strip the immunity and then you can stun for one turn. The damage dealt is increased by 50% when the enemy is buffed. So any buff, including a defense buff, of course, but of course, ideally you don't want it to be running against the defense buff. But it's a 2x mod on the S3, so very, very high damage. And you can look at the raw damage in the Mola there. That's already 35%, so very decent. Yeah, 50% increased damage when they're buffed. Like I said, I was talking about during the artifact speculation and theory crafting there. If you do 20 souls, so it does take quite a bit. You do get an extra turn, which is very usable. Especially her S2 now is increased in utility as well. So for the S2, you do actually dispel one buff from the enemies, and then you can silence up to 85% chance. Mine right now is not molded. I don't think I'm ever going to chase that +3 on it. I would just kind of skip that 5% RNG and hope for the best. Because it's not at 100%, I don't think it's worth it unless you get the exclusive equipment that goes around goes with the S2. But before increasing attack and speed for 2 turns. So after the skill, you get the buff, and it does come in handy because you could either self-attack buff, set up for herself, or you could just extend attack buffs. And getting a speed buff on her is really good as well. The damage mod on this is not even that bad. It's a 0.9, and this is an AoE skill. Because it dispels one buff, you could strip immunity as well. You could strip immunity first and then put them into the silence, which is incredibly crazy. I've had that happen to me in RTA, where someone brought in Oxalots and used the Yufine, and I didn't even think about Yufine being that much of a threat until he stripped my immunity, since I didn't have a barrier buff. But then it silenced everyone, and then I lost. So very good skill. And then the S1 is also very strong. It's a 1x mod, so not lower than the average S1s. But if you do give her an exclusive equipment, you can boost the attack of this S1, which is crazy. 50%, you do have to mold this up to a +5. Up to a 50% chance to defense break on the S1. It's 100% you should get this. With the exclusive equipment out for her increased damage on the S1, I would definitely recommend getting this to a +6. So the Mola, you for sure should be 626. Like, that's bare minimum if you're going to use her for any sort of PvP fight. You don't want to risk not having enough damage. The exclusive equipment right now I'm running is I would call the S1-2, so the one in the middle. Both of them are S1s. The first one on the left is a 35% chance to extend any buffs on her for 1 turn if you're using double slash. I saw some long time ago, someone was experimenting with this. I think it was posted on YouTube, I'm not quite sure, but using SS Akate's S2, so giving her a 3-turn immortal and having her on a counter set, and then just these two soloing, I think it was Hell Raid if I'm not mistaken, and just autoing but with the skill off. So the idea was that Yufine, with a 35% chance to increase the buff for 1 turn, you would be able to keep her immortal on. And I think she was on a counter set if I'm not mistaken, just for extra damage against mobs. He got pretty far in that Hell Raid run. It was very interesting to see, but again, I wouldn't say you would use that in any sort of PvP fight, just because it's way too RNG. 35% chance is not as good as a solid increased 30% more damage on double slash. So you're talking about a 1x mod plus a 30% more damage is insane. Her S1 actually does incredible damage with this EE. The exclusive equipment, the max effectiveness on the main stat is up to a 14%. I actually, when I was just looking at my Yufine prepping for this video, I was actually just realized that, oh, I'm not at the 14%. Definitely usable to have, just because of all the strips and debuffs that she can do. The effect, the stun, the silence, and the strips, and the defense break, of course. So having her with a bit high effectiveness is very nice to have. So I'm definitely going to chase that. I'm going to craft it soon after this video. The S2 one has up to a 15% chance, rather not up to, but gives you an additional 15% chance to silence. So that means that would work really well with this if you maximal of this. There was a 100% chance to silence it if you get that. So 100% you should get this. And if you're a player now, you don't even have Yufine, you can craft this now, so you can get the max effectiveness, and you could choose the skill you want. So in terms of stats there, that's pretty average, about almost 280 crit damage. Like I said, an additional 15% is very nice to have. Again, depending on the artifact and how you run her and how you use her, your crit rate should be ideally 90 plus. I would say you don't want to be salty, but realistically, I'm using her to nuke things that are actually too squishy, so even if I don't get the crit damage, they would die. Or I'm going for like something like an SSB, so like sharing the damage. 4100 attack and 155 speed, running on a speed set, using this speed boot there, this T88 Hell Raid weapon. These ones are really bad. I do have to craft something new. I'm just gonna get laughed at with this, but definitely more room to grow, especially I get T85s that reflect similar stats. Hopefully I can get something else. This one of course is the arena equipment, and because I had enough crit rate, or for me passable crit rate, to complete a hit set, I'm like, okay, she's gonna go on the hit set now, just because like I said, the effectiveness is useful on her. I have seen people run Yufines with T88 defense set helmets and defense set ring. That rolled really well, so the Yufine would hit as hard as mine, but has about like 1200 defense and 12,000 HP. And if you run a Draco plate on that, even on a defense team, she's quite hard to kill, especially if you have an Aureus holder, let's say i.e. Lilius. So yeah, so she'd be very good for baiting some kind of cleave comp, but then surviving and then still getting a kill, which is really nice. So again, I think Yufine has multiple uses. If you have Sirmia, if you have Luna, and you're missing an Earth Elemental nuker, she's probably one of the best, I think, if not the best. So I definitely think that she's worth pulling for. Anyways, that's my thoughts on Yufine. Oh, one more thing actually. Because of the imprint concentration, this can be very, very game changing as well. Like I said, 1228 attack. If you do get her at an SSS and you do use her a lot, getting her that 18% imprint on the self attack is definitely worth it. Imprint released, technically, I mean, unless you're pairing her with another DPS, it's not that great. But if you do get multiples of her, 100% recommend getting that imprint concentration. That's a for sure. I may pull for this banner just because I think I want one copy of the Merciless Glutton artifact, but if I do get multiples of her, I'd be pretty happy too, because I do use her quite a bit. She's very, very good. So anyways, just keep that in mind. It is a self imprint attack. Yeah, so I think I covered everything I wanted to. So in terms of artifacts, yeah, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, stuff that does more damage, or if you run Merciless Glutton, if you got really high damage stats, but I think it's situational on that artifact. So I'm gonna end this for the video recording here. If you guys have Discord, check out the Discord server, follow me on Twitter, subscribe to YouTube if you haven't. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys on the next RBTL.